Good morning.
Good morning.
I want to begin by thanking this community for being so welcoming to me and my family. The Midwest is new to us, and our extended families live in Florida, Virginia, New York, and California. So this move to Lumiere could have been a lonely and difficult one. But many of you, faculty, students, and staff, have gone out of your way to help us get settled and make us feel so a part of things that we already feel very much at home. Thank you. As I understand it, a chapel talk at La Lumiere should reflect in some way on the school motto: character, scholarship, faith. 3 simple yet provocative words. One question I've been asking myself as I've prepared for this talk is, what do these 3 virtues have in common? What links them? The first thing that occurred to me was that none of the 3 virtues can be simply handed out or handed down. Your parents and your teachers and hopefully the general culture will give you basic definitions and tools, but real attainment of character, scholarship, and faith requires that you seek them out, that you do the work necessary to acquire them for yourself. It also occurs to me that none of these virtues can be lived out in isolation. They are all achieved through relationship. Character, for example, is measured by the degree to which you consider others' welfare when you act. It's impossible to grow a strong set of ethical muscles without real interaction with real people and the real struggles they face in the world. Scholarship is measured in a similar way by the degree to which you can communicate to others what you know, and eventually by the commitment you make to a particular field of study. If you think about the best book you've ever read, or a mathematical concept that at first seemed like gibberish, but then suddenly became clear and beautiful to you, you know that the connection you have with academics can be as strong as any you have with a friend. And then there's faith, which ultimately is nothing if not the quest to claim and articulate a working relationship with that being or power which transcends us, with that power or person which created us. Thinking about the school motto in this way, we might say that a La Lumiere education aims to increase your capacity to connect with others, with the created world, and with God. If you claim such an education for yourself, and just showing up every day for classes isn't what I'm talking about, if you take hold of your own education and seriously undertake the quest for any of these 3 virtues, well, prepare for adventure and prepare to be surprised. Here are a few of mine. Mrs. Kunst's educational surprise at age 19. After doing well in my first semester of classes at Tufts University in Boston, walking down the street from my dorm and feeling pretty darn pleased with myself, I caught sight of a gorgeous, blossoming Chinese magnolia and suddenly clearly heard a voice say, "Judith, can you make a tree?" Mrs. Kunst's educational surprise at age 25. After community service projects in high school and volunteer work during and after college convinced me that I should stop dreaming about writing poems and do something practical to help those who had less than me, I went to Haiti. There I met a man named Stanley who lived in one room with 7 family members and whose most cherished possession was a portable cassette tape player with headphones but no cover, and who declared that the best way I could help him would be to go home, write great poems, and send him tapes of Beethoven's symphonies in C and B flat minor. Mrs. Kunst's educational surprise at age 30. After growing up in a conservative Protestant Christian tradition that defined salvation so rigidly that Catholics were not considered saved, I found myself not only married to a Catholic, but becoming one myself. Mrs. Kunst's educational surprise at age 34. After vowing when I received my master's degree in poetry that I would publish my first book within 5 years, I found when I achieved my goal that what the publisher wanted was not my poems, but rather my story of how Jewish rabbis had changed and deepened the way I read the Bible. This last surprise has been especially wonderful. As an English teacher and a writer, anything expressed as a story helps me make better sense of things. I found a treasure trove of such explaining stories in an ancient Jewish mode of study called Midrash. In addition to reading the Bible and thinking about it, talking about it, maybe trying to apply its principles to one's life, Midrash poses questions about the scripture and answers those questions with stories. One ancient example looks at the book of Genesis and the stories recorded there about Abraham. Genesis tells us that Abraham was a grown man when God, the one God, spoke to him and called him to pack up his family and possessions, leave the city of Ur, and go to a place that God refused to name but promised to reveal. Midrash asks, what happened during the years before God spoke to Abraham? More specifically, how did he become the kind of person who could hear God's voice and who would courageously and immediately obey it? The rabbis responded to these questions with this story. Abraham's father was an idol maker. He would make stone images and sell them in a shop in the market. One day, Abraham's father asked him to watch over the idols in his shop while he was away. While he was gone, Abraham seized a stick, smashed all the statues, and placed the stick in the hand of the biggest of them. When his father came back, he asked, "Who did this to the gods?" Abraham answered, "The biggest of them rose up and smashed all the others." His father replied, "Are you making fun of me? They can't do anything. They're merely pieces of stone." Abraham answered, "Father, let your ears hear what your mouth is saying." The action in this story looks a lot like classic cheeky teenage rebellion, and it is. His dad must have been furious. But it also looks like honor, like some serious loyalty to the pursuit of truth. And it also looks like love. For part of the power of this story is that Abraham takes the responsibility his dad gives him for the family business very seriously indeed. So seriously, in fact, that he feels bound to test, expose, and smash to smithereens any part of it that isn't true, that can't live up to what it promises. That smashing opens up the space for Abraham's dad to hear the truth coming out of his own mouth, and ultimately for Abraham himself to hear and obey the call of the living voice of God. Provocative teaching stories like this can be found in many religious traditions. Some of them even sneak across religious boundaries to make their way into other faith communities. My father told me a story when I was young that I'm sure, unbeknownst to him, originated in the Hindu tradition. Like the story of Abraham and the idols, this story too is about the quest for God and for truth. A number of blind men came to an elephant. Somebody told them that it was an elephant. The blind men asked, "What is the elephant like?" And they began to touch its body. One of them said, "It's like a pillar," for he was touching only its leg. Another man argued, "No, it's like a basket," for he was touching only one of its ears. The man who was touching the elephant's trunk talked of it differently than the man who was touching its belly, and so on. In the same way, he who has seen the Lord in a particular way limits the Lord to that alone and thinks that he is nothing else. You may have noticed that we live in a world in which it is increasingly difficult to surround oneself with people who are touching just one part of the elephant. If your family has given you the great gift of a religious heritage, be grateful and explore its riches as fully as you can. But know that you live in a time and place in which you will be forced to figure out what it means to believe what you believe in the context of many competing beliefs. What comforts me, what I sometimes literally cling to when times are hard or confusing, is the one thing all the men in the story have in common. They're all touching the elephant. They're actually making contact with God. That's so cool. It gets me excited. I am way too small a creature to comprehend the full scope, nature, character, and truth of my Creator. I frequently feel uneasy with the descriptions of him or her that others may offer. But at the end of the day, I'm just grateful that he lets us all make contact. Like a true friend to a blind person like me, God sits and lets me feel the contours of his hands, his face, his body. Now here's the weird part. He'll keep sitting there even when I pick up my sledgehammer to see if he's just an idol. God, like all his truth, is not in the least fazed by such a test. My Christian tradition even places humanity's attempt to smash God and his survival of that test at the center of our theology. I want to leave you today with 4 suggestions. First, love and honor the world that surrounds you and the ideas you encounter enough to test them. And when you encounter false idols, smash them with all the force you can muster. Second, love the people who love the idols you have smashed. Don't dismiss them because they invested in something you find to be misguided or false. In the words of one philosopher, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a great battle. Third, keep a few shards of the idols you smash. Turn them into memories, into stories you can tell your children or your students or your friends. Stories you can tell yourself when you lose your way. The stories, songs, and letters that make up the Bible talk as much about who God is not as they talk about who God is. Let your own collection of remembered disillusionments and discoveries become a scripture to you in this way. Finally, like the men in the elephant story, seek the company of other blind seekers. And if, as you walk along together, you stumble upon something immense, powerful, patient, and utterly strange, something you can't see yet you know is there, stand still. Put out your hand to touch the immensity that's being offered to you. Describe it as best you can, sure, but mostly just be still and give thanks for the rough, living hide that meets your hand. Character, scholarship, faith. A la Lumiere education. Commit yourself to the pursuit of these virtues and prepare to be surprised. Thank you for giving me your attention this morning. God bless.